Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making a Puffin Whirligig. Well, keeping on theme with our Newfoundland-inspired projects, this week's show brings us the second project in that series, and that would be a Puffin Whirligig. So what I've done is I've put together a pattern. I've drawn it up and digitized it, and that's what we're going to use to make this. So let's head over to the bench and have a look at where we start with this project. Well, for the time being, this pattern is kind of in the testing phases. I'm not really sure if it's going to work or not. It's a two-page pattern, and we'll kind of take it from there. But what we want to do is I want to make some templates for this. Depending on how many you're going to make, you can decide whether you want to do that or not. But we do need to make 4 of the wings, so we're at least going to need a template for that. So using some spray adhesive, we're going to attach these patterns to some 1/8 inch thick hardboard, and then we're going to head over to the scroll saw and carefully cut them out. Well, the very first thing we're going to concentrate on now that we have our templates is the body. And the body I'm going to make from 3/4 inch thick pine. Guys, you can use whatever you want. It doesn't have to be pine, but I'm going to use 3/4 just to give the body some rigidity. So it's as simple in this case as we're just going to trace around our pattern or our template that we just created. And with that now traced out, again, we're going to take this over to the scroll saw and we're going to cut this shape out. All right, so that now is the body shape of our puffin. But what I've done, we can see here on our pattern that we have this little crosshairs. I have drilled a small diameter hole there. In this case, it was 5/64. The only reason it was 5/64 is because that will allow my center punch to go through that hole just neatly, and I can line up my center punch there and just give it a tap through our template, and that will allow me to mark that hole because that is the center point of our hubs that allows our wings to spin. So that is kind of an important measurement. The rest of these markings are for painting, and they're not that imperative. We could play around with those as we wish. So at this point now, with that marked, let's give our puffin a really good sanding, especially around these edges. Take off any crisp, sharp edges, give it a little bit of a soft edge, and then we can move on from there. Well, I was really hoping to make the wings out of 1/4 inch ply. However, I don't have any for some strange reason, but that's okay. We will improvise, and in this case, I've got some 3/16 thick poplar that I had up in the rack, and we're going to mark out 4 of these wings and cut them at the scroll saw, the same fashion that we did the body of the puffin. Okay, now just like we did with the body of the puffin, we need to give all of these a very, very thorough sanding. Well, we now need to make the hubs. This is where our wing pieces are going to attach. Now, guys, there are a million different ways to make hubs. This is just the way that I'm going to do it. If you have a different method, then by all means use it. But what I have is 2 pieces of scrap oak here. They are 7/8 of an inch wide or thick, and the blocks measure 2 inches by 2 inches. I have marked and center punched on each one of our hubs, and I have also measured the angle from corner to corner here against this flat edge, and that works out to be 23 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark from one corner to the next to mark where we need our kerf for our wings, and then we're going to head over to the table saw. Okay, so this is our setup over here at the table saw, and I have my miter fence set to that 23 degrees that we measured, and I have a sacrificial block here. It shouldn't take any of the cutting from the blade, but it gives me something to clamp onto, and I have it clamped onto the fence, and as well I have the center hub for our wings clamped on to that. It also has the support back here of the fence, but there's not enough of that support to be able to hold it with your hands. So you're best to use clamps and keep your hands out of the way. I have my blade raised to 3/4 of an inch, and I have this set so that the center of the blade strikes here at the corner. Now guys, don't follow your mark here at the top of your block, because these will actually be the opposite of what your angle is that you're cutting. So don't set your saw to cut the angle that you see at the top, because you're going to screw it up. It's going to be wrong. You need it the opposite way around. Either way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a pass on all of the sides that I've marked. And once I get that done, we're just going to make slight adjustments to our block until we get the 3/4 inch deep by 3/16 inch kerf here that we need to house our wings. All right, and once you're happy with that, what we can do is we can mount our wings in these slots. And the way that they're going to get mounted is so that the back of the wing is closer to the outside. That way when the wind hits it, the wing goes this way, kind of like a fan blade. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 sections each of these wings, and we are going to mount them just like this. And this will give us our kind of propeller wings. Once we get that done, guys, we can just wait for this to dry, because we're going to have to give the hub a sanding and that sort of thing. So get your wings glued in place, and once that's done, we can move on to the next step. Okay, so while we're waiting for those wings to dry, I've gone back to my body, and that hole that we punched at those crosshairs, I have drilled a through 1/4 inch diameter hole. And the next pieces that we're going to need will be a couple pieces of 1¼ inch diameter hardwood dowel. And I have marked the center on one end, and on the other end I have drilled a 1/4 inch diameter hole that's about 1/2 inch deep. Now guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of 1/4 inch diameter dowel, 1 3/4 inch long. And I'm going to glue it in through here, and then use that dowel to glue these pieces of dowel onto either side. That way they're equal on both sides, because they'll be centered on the dowel. And what these are is these are spacers for our wings. Because of the angle of the wings, if we just mount them right to the body, those blades hit on the body and it's going to mess it up, and it's not going to be able to spin. So we have to space it out. So we're going to glue these in place and let those dry. Now guys, for all of the glue that I'm using for this project, because it's going to be outside and exposed to rain, I am using Titebond 3. The same glue I use for my cutting boards, because it's waterproof. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't have to use that, but you know what, it helps. Well, it's been about a week since I've touched this project. Life gets in the way sometimes, but all of our parts are dry. Now guys, we need to consider how we're going to mount our wings to our puffin body. Now you can do it all kinds of ways. You can use bearings, that sort of thing. But for me, I want as little friction as possible. So what I have here is a stainless steel straw from the dollar store. It came in like a 2 or 3 pack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the outer diameter of this straw. And then whatever that measurement ends up to be, we're going to drill that size hole right here in the middle of each of our hubs. Once we get that hole drilled, we're going to cut our straw to the same length as what our hubs are wide. And using CA glue, much like the way you glue an insert into a pen blank when you're turning pens, we're going to glue in these stainless steel straws into the middle of our hubs. Well, it turns out that no glue was needed for those straws, only because the hole that I drilled was tight enough that you could just hammer them friction fit in place. So I've drilled a pilot hole here in the center of our dowel spacers on the body. And what I'm going to do is I have some number 10 washers. We're going to place one on each side of our wing, and using a number 8 by 2-inch screw, we're going to secure our wings in place. Now you just want this to be super loose, guys. You don't want to crank this down. And we can see how freely that turns. Absolutely zero friction due to the stainless steel straw that is in here, kind of as a bushing. So we're going to screw the other one in just to get the hole, kind of thread it with the screw. Then we're going to take the whole thing apart, and it's time to paint it. Well, we're not going to get fancy here. We just have some latex household paint. I believe this is a paint and a primer combination. We're going to give all of our pieces of our puffin a good base coat with this, probably 2 coats, and probably sanding in between. With this being a water-based paint, it's probably going to raise the grain. So we're going to give it a couple coats and let it completely dry. Okay, so I've got 2 coats of our base coat white and the paint is dry. I want to transfer now our painting pattern from our puffin onto the puffin itself. Now guys, this is not imperative. It doesn't have to be exact, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this pattern up. I've cut a hole to accommodate our dowel. And I'm just going to hold it in place and just trace. I put a little piece of graphite paper there. And we're just going to trace this around. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a guideline for now. And once you get it all transferred on the one side, we can flip it over and do the same on the opposite side. Okay, and that is our pattern, our painting pattern, transferred on both sides. Guys, you need a few colors. You need black, you need yellow, you need orange, and you need red. That's it. That's what we're going to paint this with. I don't think we need a video of me painting this puffin. But one thing I will say is that the wings, I'm going to do them a little differently. And what I'm going to do is the outside surface of the wings, I'm going to paint black. The inside, I'm going to leave white because that's the way a puffin is. Their wings are kind of whitish on the inside. And I think that'll give a good contrast when you see it spinning between the black on this side and the white on this side and vice versa. So I'm going to get this all painted up and then I'll see you when I get that finished. Well, once your paint is dry, right up through the middle here, somewhere in the middle of the puffin, we're going to drill a 1/8 diameter hole. Drill it as deep as you can because what that's going to be for is a piece of coat hanger wire, because we are going to embed this coat hanger wire into a pole and then the wire will come up inside of the puffin itself, allowing it to turn in the wind. It's not the most technical mounting, but it will provide for the easiest attachment and removal of the puffin should you want to take it in, say in the winter or that sort of thing. And when all your paint is dry, we just need to screw this together. Now, of course, we're going to use those 2-inch screws that we had earlier. Just make sure that they're loose fitting on here so that these straw bushings can do their job and allow them to spin freely. But as well, make sure we've got a washer here in between the 2 wooden parts and another washer between the head of the screw and the wing itself. So this is the metal post that I'm going to mount my puffin on, and what we've got is a piece of 1/2-inch dowel inside of it, and then I've secured that piece of 1/2-inch dowel right there with a number 8 by 1/2-inch screw. So all I'm going to do is I have this length of coat hanger wire. I've drilled a 3/32 diameter hole here. I'm going to use just a little bit of CA glue on that coat hanger wire, and we're going to push it down inside this hole and glue it in place. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to spray or squirt some CA glue all over the end of this dowel. And I'm going to hit it with some accelerator, and that's going to seal the end of that dowel for me. And now just to test it, of course, I have a fan on it just to make sure that the blades all spin freely. Now, guys, the one last thing I want to do to this is I want to spray it with a clear lacquer just to seal in all the painting that I've done. And after that, we can just mount it somewhere outside where it's going to be exposed to wind and let our little puffin fly. And there you have it. Another Newfoundland-inspired project with a Puffin Whirligig. Guys, I have had this on my list of things to do for years, and it wasn't until we visited Elliston this year that I was kind of inspired by the puffins there on the hills. Even though it was really windy that day and we didn't get to see very many of them, it was still an inspiration for this project to see the puffins. So this one has been a long time in the making. Now, truth be told, it actually took a lot longer than what I had anticipated. And the biggest part of all of it was the painting. I absolutely detest painting. And this project has a lot of it, but unfortunately, that's the nature of this project. Without the painting, it doesn't look like a puffin. So if you're not going to be willing to paint it, then don't bother making it, because it's not going to look like anything other than a bird silhouette. But I guess you could do a silhouette if you wanted to, but what fun would that be? Then it wouldn't be an East Coast or Newfoundland inspired project. It would just be a silhouette of any old bird. Either way, guys, this is a fun one to make. Again, more time consuming with the painting than I thought. You want to take your time. The painting isn't that imperative. You just need to give it the look of a puffin. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mine is far from perfect. In fact, if you look up close at it, it's horrible. Like, I did a terrible job on the painting. I don't know why. I was having problems with controlling the brush and with the pigment that day, but it doesn't matter. I still think it turned out great, and I love the way this thing flies. So, you know what, guys? It's a fun project, and I hope you're going to give this one a try for yourself. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. The pattern for this project, I have a few little tweaks to do, like a color schedule kind of thing of how to paint it. And I have a few little extra things to add to the actual pattern itself, but it will be, by the airing of this show, available for free download off of my website. You just want to visit my website, acutabovewoodworkings.com. You click on the free pattern sections, and it's right there for the taking. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, if you found any part of today's show to be interesting, likable, informative, fun, you know what, why not like and subscribe to the channel? We have an absolutely incredible audience base here on the channel, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of that. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in again here to part 2, or the second in our series of East Coast inspired projects. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's giving you some inspiration to make one of these for yourself. It doesn't have to be a puffin. It can be any kind of bird. I hope you're going to give this one a try. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.